Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Hello Josh, I'm also joined by Plant Josh. I thought I'd bring him in. I needed some other life in this room other than me. It's been 3 months, losing my mind, so I've made some friends. I think Plant Josh is already dying because he's not looking very good.
Thanks, man.
But you know, real Josh is doing all right. But depending on plant experts can let me know whether or not he's supposed to look like this or not.
I don't like this, right?
Because
you know, like the picture of Dorian Gray, where he's got like the picture of his soul in the attic, and that's getting like decayed. I feel like this plant is going to be a reflection of me. Either if it flourishes, then I'll flourish. If you start to overwater it and keep it out of the sun, Scott, that's going to have a negative impact on me. So keep an eye out for that.
I'm not going to lie, you are drowning right now. I did care for you a lot in the early days, and I think I've done you in. So not to worry, this isn't the gaming news whatsoever, but you know, maybe it'll get you through. No, the actual news for today, as reported by IGN, but initially reported by Andrew Bowman, the digital games curator over at the Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, is more footage of the cancelled Avengers game that was scheduled to be released in 2012. And I just thought this was a way to just talk about the general state of Marvel games. The fact that, I know we have the Avengers game coming up, but Marvel, just the last decade has been really weird with them. I feel like even the footage of this, and I don't want to be, you know, too harsh, but and also I kind of want to throw it down to the comments because I remember the first-person Kinect Hulk game that was, I think, part of this, because part of the original Avengers game, which was going to have Kinect functionality, and you could go into training rooms and practice as different characters. And the footage that's come out now is Captain America running really weirdly, running kind of like Tom Cruise, looking a bit weird. And I remember that old Hulk footage, and even back then, even though, like, you know, peak Avengers hype, I remember thinking like, oh God, why are you doing a weird first-person motion control thing? So I guess, what are your initial thoughts on this and in general first-person Marvel games?
Well, yeah, this one is a really strange example because, like you said, it was supposed to come out almost 10 years ago now. It was cancelled, and we've seen bits and bobs from it over the few years. I think this is the most extensive look that we've had at gameplay. Like you said, you see Captain America. I think you see Hulk and Thor and Iron Man in it as well. But to me, it's kind of always been a fascinating title because the whole concept sounds weird. It's like this score-based Left 4 Dead style multiplayer beat 'em up essentially from a first person, and all of those elements are not something I'd usually associate with Marvel games or the Avengers. But like you said, we've had so little from, you know, Marvel superheroes in the gaming space over the past decade or so, or at least so little genuine great titles that I've been more or less devouring any bit of scrap of information on this game for years. I've become almost kind of obsessed with it because I kind of want to play it, even though I don't think it looks very good. And I don't think you're entirely unfair to kind of rag on it because from what we've seen so far, you know, I think it was cancelled in mid-2011, so a year or maybe even less before it was going to come out. So you'd expect it, at least gameplay-wise, would be shaping up quite well. But to me, it looks like it looks sluggish, it looks kind of a bit uninspired, and I don't get the sense that these are super-powered people. There's the moment where, like, Thor throws his hammer, and it's just kind of this limp thing, and everyone's kind of trudging around through quicksand. It didn't look awesome, and yet, Scott, the idea of playing a brainless button masher starring my favorite Marvel superheroes with friends is almost something that I want, and I wish it came out and it was a 5 out of 10 and we could enjoy it.
But I mean, that as a sentence, that's literally what they delivered with Ultimate Alliance 3, and that was really boring after a while.
See, I couldn't disagree more. I really enjoyed Ultimate Alliance 3. And that's
all the way
different.
through?
I did enjoy it all the way through. I did I didn't do a big review, I did a review of Ultimate Alliance 3, where I enjoyed that. That's the kind of mindless fun that sometimes you just want. We talk a lot about games where, you know, podcast games, as I think Ben Roy calls them, where you almost turn your brain off and you just kind of do something else while taking your mind off whatever's happening in the world or whatever. And to me, this kind of looked like one of those. You team up with friends, you take down a bunch of Skrulls during a secret invasion style storyline, and you just have a bit of fun. It's not going to be another Marvel Spider-Man. It probably won't even be the Avengers project from Square Enix, but it looked kind of like the filler experience that sometimes I have a guilty kind of desire for.
Well, the thing is, I think that's what they were going for. Like, obviously, the thing is, I remember when there was a report came out a few years ago about the average age of an MCU fan, and it was like 27, and it's obviously way older than the assumption that it's young teenagers or even children or whatever. Whereas something like this feels geared towards that immediate, like, child friendly, like, here's your escapist, like, kick kind of thing. Like, you go play as Iron Man, play as Hulk, do whatever, smash some dudes, jobs are good. I think they just need more to it. I know that the footage is obviously unfinished, but even the Avengers game that's coming up feels like it falls into that same mold, where everything is just sort of set piece based. It's super easy. Like, there's a weird feeling around the new Avengers game that I feel like I haven't seen anybody excited for. I know Ewan is, but even I feel like he kind of going like, oh, I don't know, like I want to be more psyched about it. Like, no one brings it up. It's hardly ever sort of mentioned, and I feel like they're always aiming for that quick release, like easy access like experience. Whereas they could just take the time and do something more in depth. Like, even Spider-Man was very formulaic, but it worked. But yeah, I guess like in terms of learning the lessons from the past, do you think that like the new Avengers game, I don't know, is going to do anything different to what this is ostensibly going for?
I think it will. I think the new Avengers game is striving for something closer to, Marvel's Spider-Man. But you make a very good point in that this is the Avengers we're talking about. It's like the biggest property in media today. Like, the last Avengers movie is the highest grossing film of all time now. You know what I mean? Like, these characters have never been bigger. And yet the Avengers game, whilst it's going to be big, it doesn't have the same momentum behind it, like even something like Cyberpunk does, you know what I mean? Like Cyberpunk, which is otherwise an unknown compared to, like, at least in the mainstream space. And that seems like it's got more of a push behind it than the actual Marvel's Avengers. And that, to me, like you said, is just kind of strange. And it's also strange how this version of the game back in 2011, back when it was from a completely different publisher, completely different developer, also had that same kind of feeling of, oh, it's just another thing. It's just another superhero game. We're changing things up, but it's not going to make a cultural impact in the way that the characters have across different media, which is kind of, it's weird how that hasn't translated, at least yet. I am hopeful for the Avengers game coming out this year, and I do hope it makes an impact and is very good. But in the run-up to, its launch and what we've seen so far, it doesn't have the swell behind it that you would expect from these huge, this huge brand.
It's in a really weird place because, like, obviously people bounced off the fact that it doesn't have, like, Chris Evans, Downey Jr., it doesn't have those recognizable faces, like, propping up the likenesses. I never expected that in the first place, like the same way as in the Spider-Man game. It's like, this is going to be that game developer's take on it. And Crystal Dynamics sort of had to get out there and be like, look, this is our version of the Avengers. And even then, they've sort of reformed some of the faces. But I kind of wonder if, one, they've missed their window for me. Like, they haven't tied in with any of the movies. I know that it is its own standalone thing, but if you were going to cash in on Avengers hype, it would be that window in between Infinity War and Endgame, or just any point across the last 10 years, as opposed to waiting until post Thanos. And then pretty much everybody, same with kind of Star Wars, is just kind of like, I'm kind of up for taking a break from this for a bit. And they're sort of coming in later on and being like, hey, by the way, here's this thing that you really cared about 2 years ago, and trying to sort of cash back in on that. I think that's in a weird spot. But even Marvel's approach to video games overall, like, this decade has been very app focused. Like, it feels like they sort of deviated away from, trying to give a game studio, like, something that would tie in with whatever the recent movie was. It seems like this was the last time they tried to have an Avengers game alongside the 2012 one. And obviously it went bust when THQ, fell apart when THQ went bust, and then they got some of the assets carried across to the Ubisoft game, which became Battle for Earth, which I didn't even realize came out. Like, you kind of remembered that?
Kind of, like, I had a fragment of a memory partly forgotten about the Avengers Battle for Earth. I forgot that was a thing, and I had no idea it was actually made from some leftover assets.
But that's the thing. I feel like they sort of moved away from, like, what was the established model across the 2000s of give a game studio access to the movie, like the story, whatever we're going to be doing, put something out in time with the movie, and they've sort of pivoted into this Spider-Man or New Avengers mold. But it's just kind of fascinating thinking about how something as humongous as the MCU hasn't had anything on the game side until Spider-Man came back in. But I don't know, I think it's weird having such a massive property like the Avengers and not really being able to capitalize on it. And even this footage didn't make us go, oh God, I really missed that. I'm just kind of like, I'm kind of glad you didn't put that out, to be honest.
It's kind of funny how, like, even though the mediums are quite similar in terms of, presentation style, or certainly investment from characters and fandoms and stuff, that you haven't seen more cross-pollination when it comes to movies and video games. Like, obviously the Avengers and the superheroes didn't originate on cinema screens, but they arguably became as popular as they are because of the movies, because the movies introduced them to a much wider audience and made them a kind of like cultural, everyday household name. And yet we haven't seen, especially from Disney and all of their properties, like those brands done well in a video game space, or at least to the extent that you would imagine. Like, the amount of money you would imagine Disney could make from their characters in video games is mind-boggling. They already make so much money, and if they had good games based on these characters that everyone pretty much universally loves, like, it just feels like it's money being left on the table, and it makes me wonder how much understanding they actually have about like the game space, because Disney tried to have their own like teams, and they said, this is too much effort, we're not putting out good games, they're not selling well, we're not going to do this anymore, we're going to try to outsource our games. And that's what Marvel has been going all in with now, by signing up Insomniac, by going to Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics and stuff like that. But we haven't really seen the fruits of that labor come out yet. We have Spider-Man, which obviously did very well, but there's no telling whether that's going to be the Iron Man of this MCU universe, because we haven't had any other games to quite support that yet. So even though that was a success, we don't know whether that's going to set a precedent kind of going forward.
Yeah, but both Marvel stuff and Star Wars, like, it's just like you said, the way that Disney have approached it, like, now they're going to individual teams and having those meetings and sort of preparing stuff for the next generation of consoles. But even like their management of Star Wars, it was like, well, we're just going to give it to EA, and they're going to do 2 games for like 10 years, both Battlefronts, and we're going to get a bunch of apps alongside, and just it's going to be a little bit weird. So hopefully all this stuff changes in the next generation, but it's weird seeing the remnants of what should have been, but then also realizing that the direction they were going for me doesn't really line up with, it never would have caught on in that true greatness kind of way that the movies have. So yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below of the footage that's been released. Do you want to see something like a first-person Avengers game going forward, or at some point, and are you actually remotely psyched for the Avengers game that we're going to be getting? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.